All right. I think we are live now. I just got to wait a couple seconds here and make sure the stream is working all right. So just bear with me here. I do have a little animation of what we're going to be working on today in this live stream here on the screen for you so you can see it. It's a pretty simple little setup. It doesn't take a whole lot of work, but I think it's pretty nifty and will solve some problems for me here coming up in the future, which we'll talk about. So if you are watching this live, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and dropping a comment in the chat and letting me know that you can see my screen and you can hear me all right, that would help me out. Make sure I'm not bugging out on any of this since I'm flying solo today. Sometimes it can be difficult to manage the 3 different screens I have going on. So I'll give that just a second to come on and get everybody here in live, and we'll knock this out. I don't think this is going to take a terribly long amount of time. I basically worked on all this morning, got it figured out, reset all this up to prep it, copied all my code out of here. So I'm ready to go as far as kind of copying and pasting some things. And then after this live stream finishes, I'll make sure to share all this code in the group and in the description of this video so you can go back and copy and paste everything. You should be able to, after this is over, take exactly what I've done here, copy and paste a few things, and be ready to go. All right, so we will go ahead and jump in here. So the idea on this is, as you can see on this sample I have here, eventually I'm going to want to redo the admin bars website with GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks, but there are a few things that I'm going to want to do a little bit differently, maybe not a complete overhaul, but some different things. And one of those things is a better system for the light mode, dark mode switcher. I have something in there now that is quite half-assed and not very well thought out. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work properly. But a lot of people really don't like the dark mode, reading long form content in dark mode. And I understand that. However, I think our branding just works so much better in dark mode. So I do want to come up with a system for that works a little bit better. So that's what I was playing with this morning. So essentially what I have here, this is just a sandbox install. And it has a blog post I copied and pasted from our website into it. And I've set up just a fairly simple blog post template. So if we just jumped out of here, just so everybody knows exactly where we're at, here inside of my GeneratePress elements, I guess I should say I am using GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks for all of this. Here inside my GeneratePress elements, I have a block element for a blog post template. So if we jump in there, that's the first place we're going to be working. Essentially, I have this really simple blog post layout set up. In here is kind of a hero section at the top. It's got the post title, the post date, the author name, and the terms. And then we have this second section here that's a 2-column section. In this left-hand column, we have the dynamic content for the blog post. And then we have kind of a sidebar over here, what I'm going to be using as a sidebar. So this eventually is going to have the kinds of things that would be in a sidebar, maybe related posts and things like that. For today's demo, we're just going to stick the little switcher in there for the light mode, dark mode. So that will just be kind of our holding place for that. So what I'm going to do here is walk through these steps. There's just a few steps we need to do, write a little bit of CSS, copy and paste a little JavaScript, and we're good to go. So here I do have open this blog post template element, as well as I have the customizer open over here because we're going to be doing some work in there so we can see things as we go. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab this second section here. We'll go ahead and open up the list view. This second section is where all the blog content's going to be, and that's really the only thing I'm concerned about flip-flopping from light mode to dark mode. Now, you could use the same system to do an entire switch of the entire website from, the header down all the way through the footer across all the pages. It's a little bit more complicated that way, but this system would essentially do that for you. You would just have to target things a little bit differently. But for the purposes of this video and what I need to do in this actual situation, I really just need to switch this specific container. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give this container an ID. So that way I can target it with my JavaScript and with my CSS. So with this container selected, I'm just going to go over here to HTML anchor. This is where you can add an ID. And I'm going to type in blog content. And so now you can see it's got this ID on this section here. So that is the first step completed. It's fairly simple. This is just exactly what we're going to be targeting with the rest of this. Now, the next thing we're going to need to do is put in a some kind of switcher button. So some kind of mechanism for somebody on the front end to click something and change it from light mode to dark mode. So there's tons of different ways to do this. What I actually did was I went to Bootstrap icons, which is what I use quite a bit. And I grabbed a icon of a sun, and I also grabbed an icon of a moon. So I think I grabbed this one here. And essentially what I did was bring that into Adobe XD, and I just overlaid those two on top of each other. So the sun's on top of the moon, or vice versa. One of the two is on top of the other. And I made the moon white, or excuse me, let's see. We'll make the moon, now I can't even remember. I made the moon one color, the sun the other color, and I'm actually just going to show and hide these based upon if the light mode or dark mode is on. So it's really just one image, and we're going to use some CSS to affect that SVG and show and hide it. So instead of going through all of this code for the SVG, I'm just going to grab it and copy and paste it here, and we'll talk about it a little bit. 1 second here. All right, copying that code. And what we'll do just over in the sidebar is we're just going to use a custom HTML block, and I'll paste this in here. Now, it's a little bit hard to see inside of this window. So we'll grab a notepad here and I'll paste it in here so we can talk about it a little bit. You know, obviously looking at an SVG this way isn't a whole lot of help, but there are a couple things in here you want to take note of. So the first one here is I have this on click function here. So basically this is going to trigger this JavaScript that we're going to be implementing here in a second. Essentially it says on click, I want you to execute this function that I set up. Now we haven't set up that function yet. We will here in a second. But essentially that's the only thing you need in here to get that part of it working. Now I did go through this SVG actually inside of XD, and I grouped the moon together and I grouped the sun together. So you could see this group ID for moon. There's all the SVG code for the moon, and there should also be one in here, group ID for sun. Now this is stuff I probably wouldn't do inside code here. It's stuff I'm doing actually in XD, but we'll see here in a second how that works out for me to be able to show and hide one of those based on these conditions. So now that we got that in here, I will just hit update. We'll go back here into the customizer just so we can live preview it. I'll go back into this blog post and get it refreshed. And we should see here, we have the sun and moon icon. They're overlapping on top of each other right now, so you can't see it very well, but we'll take care of that here in just a second. All right, so the next thing we need to do is go ahead and set up a place to put in the JavaScript we need for this. So what I'll do is I will go in here to add element, and we're going to go to hook and hit create. And we can give this a name, just dark light switcher JS. And again, I'm going to copy and paste this code that I have here, but we'll talk through it, and I will supply all this as soon as the stream's over. So essentially what we have here is a script that's going to run. The function that we're going to do is essentially a name that you make up. For this instance, I called it color mode switcher. And what we're going to do with this function is we're going to get an element by ID, and that ID is blog content, which if you remember just a second ago, we went to the section that we're wanting to switch and we gave it the ID of blog content. And when that happens, what we want to do is toggle a class on and off. So what we're going to do is take that element and we're going to toggle this class light mode. Now we haven't wrote all this CSS yet, but that's what we're going to need to do is essentially the little SVG I just set up had the little line in there that said on click color mode switcher. So when you click that element, we want to activate this function. When this function's activated, we're going to get that ID of the section we targeted, and we're going to toggle on the light mode class. So if it's off by default, we're going to toggle it on. If you click it again, it will go off. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stick this element inside my WP footer, and then I'm going to go here and just have it fire off on my blog post. So we'll just go here under post to post, and we'll hit publish. So now that should be working here. Because we haven't wrote any of the CSS yet, we're not going to be able to see that in here. We could go inside the console here. Let's see. We can do that. We'll jump in here and take a look if we can see this actually happening. All right. So if we click on this over here, we should see all this happening, but maybe not. You know what? Let's not even worry about it. Let's write some CSS and we'll be able to see it in real time anyways. All right. So what we're going to do here is a few things. So we do have some classes already set up on that dark mode, light mode switcher. So the first thing I'm going to go in here and do is I had put a class inside of that SVG. It's called mode switch button, and I can't type mode switch button. And we can do a couple things here. One is we can give it a width. We'll say 24 pixels just to make sure that that's working. Let's say 240 pixels just so we can see it happening over here on the side. Height of 240 pixels. So we should see it's nice and big now. So we can see that moon and that sun. We know that this selector is working. I'm just going to take it back down to 24 pixels. The other thing we're going to want to do is change the cursor to pointer. Now we want to do that just so when we hover over it, our mouse turns to a pointer so people realize that they can click on it. Now the next thing we need to do is set up toggling this from the sun to the moon showing. So I'm going to copy and paste this code in here. So you don't have to sit here and struggle through me writing it, but we'll talk about each little part of it here. So basically what we have on here is the group for the moon inside the SVG is set to an opacity of 0 right now. So that's why we can see this moon disappeared. In fact, if we just go ahead and bump up this size again, if I took this line off of here, you can see the moon comes back. But right now we have the moon set to opacity of 0 and the sun set to an opacity of 1. Since we're already in dark mode, I want to be showing the sun so people know they can click that and go to the light mode, and I don't want to show the moon. However, if this element, this group here is inside of a class of light mode, which when we click this, it will be, we're going to change the opacity of the moon to 1 and the opacity of the sun to 0. So if this is all set up correctly, we should already be doing that. Now, since it's not changing the background color yet, you can't see it, but you can see that it is transitioning these from the opacity 1 to the opacity 0. I do have a little bit of a transition duration of a half a second, and we're transitioning the opacity, and we're using the ease in function here. So now let's actually see this come to life. So what we need to do now is target our actual light mode class. So what I'm going to do is type in here .light mode, and we'll open our brackets here. And the first thing we're going to want to do is change the background color. So just for simplicity, we'll just say white, and we'll test out that this is working. So now when I click this button, our JavaScript should be going through and adding the class light mode to the section we're targeting. And then the CSS should be changing the background color that it currently has over to this background color of white. So let's see if we didn't screw it up here. So perfect, it did it. Now we can see our moon here, and we click back, the sun comes back. So that works perfectly. Now, the other thing we might want to do on here is change the text color. So we'll just say color, and we'll go 0C, 0C, 0C. We can test it again. And now we can see our text comes through just fine. So we've essentially created this dark mode, light mode switch as it is. I'll go ahead and make this switcher smaller again, just because it's kind of obnoxiously large. Maybe we'll go a little bit bigger just so everybody can see it on the screen. So now all that is working. Now, if we go back to our default mode, which is the dark mode, we can see our headline color is yellow. And I do have some links down here. The links are also yellow. So if we switch this over now to the light mode, this is not going to pass color contrast standards, and it's quite hard to read. So we also need to think about the CSS that needs to change on these headings based on if we're in light mode or dark mode. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do another selector here for light mode, but I'm going to say the H2, and we'll do it again. We'll comma separate these. We'll do light mode H3. I don't think there's any H4s on here, but just for the sake of doing this, light mode H4. We can open and close those brackets. And what we can do is just change the text color on these too. So we can say color, and we'll do 0C, 0C, 0C. And now we can see in the light mode, these are now the black color for the headlines, and we switch it back to the default dark mode, they're still in yellow. So that is working perfectly. The other thing we're going to want to do is work on these links, which down here at the bottom, obviously this works fine in dark mode, but if we go to the light mode and scroll down here, that's very difficult to see. So we'll do this again, light mode, and this time we'll put an A in there for our links, and we can change the color of it, and we'll just go with that same color here, 0C, 0C, 0C. Now it's got the underline, so that should probably be enough, but if we just wanted to spruce it up a little bit, we could do things like text decoration color, and we could go back with that yellow color we had, just kind of tie in the branding. So now the underline there is yellow. We could even give it a background color just to kind of separate a little bit. We'll do that same color. It's FEC 200, but we can bring down the opacity. So if we put a 20 in there at the end of that hex code, it will bring it down to 20% opacity. So this gives it kind of the effect that it's highlighted there. Now, those highlights start and stop hard right on the end of those letters. So what we'll do is just give it a little bit of padding. We'll say 0 EM on the top and bottom and 0.2 EM on the left and right. I know it's hard to see on here, but if we zoom in a little bit, you can see there's a little bit of space between the end of this link and where the background color stops, which I think looks a little bit nicer. All right. One thing we might want to do when we have those little backgrounds, often I'll want to do a bit of a border radius on them. You probably won't even be able to see this on here, but that does round off the corners of that background. And then when we hover over it, we're probably going to want to change what this does too. So what we can do is just give ourselves another selector here, light mode, hover, and this is going to be affecting what happens when we hover over it. So what we could do just for simple demonstration purposes is we could just change the background color, and we just go with that same yellow color here. So now when we hover over it, that opacity goes away and we go to the full opacity. Now we might want to transition this a little bit, so we can do transition 0.2 seconds, background, ease in. If we do that, it should kind of quickly fade in and out from those two colors. All right, now if we go back up here, we're essentially at this point, we are finished setting this up. So we have our switcher here that will turn everything to the new colors we set up. We're showing the sun and hiding the sun and showing the moon when we click on it. And then we have these headings changing colors here, as well as the links changing colors down here at the bottom. Now, one thing you might notice is this is changing pretty abruptly. It's instantly changing from one to the other. So we might want to do something just to even that out a little bit and make it a little bit of a transition between the two. So what we can do is we can target that blog content ID we set up and just put a transition, I can never spell it right, of 0.2 seconds. We'll do all, since we're changing several different colors here. That might not be best for performance, but it should be fine in this case. And we'll do ease in again. So now you can see this fades in a little bit. In fact, we'll just change this to 2 seconds. So just to exaggerate it, you can really see what it does here. So when we click it now, it's transitioning over 2 seconds from light mode to dark mode. Of course, that's a little too quick. Maybe we'll do 0.3, see how that looks. So now it just gives kind of the gentle transition between the two. So we'll go ahead and save that. We can jump out of here and take a look at it on the front end. So if somebody's scrolling through here and wants to read in light mode, they can click that button, and that instantly just changes this one section we want to change over to the light mode view. And of course, they can change back just like that. Now, you might not want to put this button right here in a sidebar. One thing I thought about doing, we can jump in and do this real quick. I don't see any questions coming in the chat, so hopefully everything's working properly. But what we could do is we could set this blog content section that we have on the screen. We could set its position to relative. And then we could go back and target this mode switch button, which is our SVG icon over here. And we could say position absolute. And now we can kind of position this around the page where we'd like. So we might say we want left of 20 pixels. So now it's right over here next to our text, where we can still save this space over here in the sidebar for something else. Of course, you could just drop this icon wherever you want inside of your blog post template. But this is one idea here. You can just position that absolutely here in the top left corner, which works just fine. People can switch that out if they need to. But plenty of different ways to do it. And like I said, you could essentially, with that little bit of JavaScript in there, you could target a whole lot more things. Of course, in this example, all I'm wanting to really do is just this main content inside this blog post. But it's a quick and easy way to do this that shouldn't have too many performance issues. And, this probably took us, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes to do it as I was explaining it. So if you were just doing this off of memory or off of some written instructions, I think you could have something like this set up in about 5 or 10 minutes, no problem. So what I'll do is I'm going to end this live stream here in a second since I don't see any questions coming in, and I will take all of this code and put some links down in the description so you can just copy and paste this. I'll include this SVG icon and the CSS. You need to transition those between the two so you can take that and use it exactly how I have here, or you can take it and customize it and tweak it to just however you need. So anyways, I hope this was helpful, gives you some ideas, and I would love to see what you create with it. I would love to see if you have any better ideas on how I can improve this. I went through a bunch of different tutorials and kind of picked and choose what I wanted and figured out a way to make it all work. But I'm sure there's 100 different ways to do this. So if you have some tweaks you would suggest to this, I would love to hear those down in the comments below. And we will catch you guys on the next stream. Bye-bye.